I'm your host, Dr. Phil Hoffman, and coming up on this episode of Pause, we're going to be talking about Child Safe of Central Missouri. That's coming up now on Pause. And welcome to Pause. I'm your host, Dr. Phil Hoffman, and today joining me are Craig Cohen and Mary Lee Guthrie, who are board members from Child Safe of Central Missouri. Welcome.
Thank you, Phil.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Child Safe and what Child Safe is. If folks are watching this now and they've never heard of the organization before, what do you do?
Child Safe is a great organization, a not-for-profit organization located in Sedalia. We service 11 counties, and we provide interview services for children that are victims of child abuse or sexual abuse. And we bring in a multidisciplinary team of investigators into one location. The child comes in, tells their story one time to our forensic interviewers, and we videotape that. And then we can share their story with the different departments that need that information in order to potentially take a case to prosecution.
And obviously, this is a very difficult thing for the child, and I'm sure a very difficult thing for an organization like yours in terms of just trying to deal with some of the things that come up and some of the stories that come up. But having that ability for the child to only have to relive that event that one time, it's huge, right?
Absolutely, and we do it in an environment that is safe. If you look at the system, it's created for adults. It's not created for children. And about, 15 years ago, several key people in the Sedalia community recognized that we needed to have a place where children could come in and feel like they hadn't done anything wrong and be able to tell their story in a manner that was respectful and didn't cause the child to be repeatedly re-victimized.
And Craig, you, obviously as a board member, you've been involved with Child Safe now for a while. What drove you first to get involved, and what was your interest in helping with Child Safe?
Of course, the interest in children is always very important. The other aspect that I've always carried through with my testimony is that if I ever had a family member that needed this service, where do you go? Who wants to talk about child sexual abuse? Who thinks about that? And it's never going to happen to me. And unfortunately, in my own family, in this past year, I've been on the board for about 6 years, but that testimony, I'm very thankful for the Child Safe Board being in place because I had a family member that actually needed to use the services of a child advocacy center similar to Child Safe in Southern Missouri. So it was very important to have that service available. By the time the story had gotten to me from my family members, they had already reached out to that child advocacy center, and as Mary Lee had shared, the family member had already went through that safe process and already had the story been told really freshly and by the appropriate people.
And it's really, I mean, as you mentioned earlier, Mary Lee, the legal process is one thing, and then giving the child that space to get through the emotional, I mean, I can imagine they're reliving the event when they're telling about it. What's the difference from just a strict, interview by law enforcement versus what happens in Child Safe?
Oh, I think first and foremost is the location. Our Child Safe organization is in a house. So when the child comes, they have an opportunity to sit down and watch cartoons, color in a coloring book until it's their time to go back and speak with an investigator. And so that by and large takes away the piece of having to go to the sheriff's office where bad people go. So it already puts them at ease, makes them feel comfortable, and it takes away that stigma that they possibly are not the victim, but they're the guilty party in this. And so I think that's the most important thing that Child Safe is able to do. And then our interviewers, have extensive training in interviewing children. And so they're able to get to the heart of the issue and ask the questions that lead to prosecution when abuse actually has in fact taken place. And our the way the system works is because the interviews are videotaped, oftentimes a case won't go to prosecution for 2, 3, even 4 years. A child can change quite a bit during that time period and really can begin to confuse the story, the details, the facts, and forget things. And so being able to have that taped interview that then is presentable and admissible in a court of law is a fantastic opportunity to help us, be able to put some people away that have done some terrible things to children. So, and then our interviewers are also available to go to court and to represent on behalf of the child.
Well, one of the things too, I think is very important about the process is, there's been some research done lately that shows that every time we recount a story, we sort of alter it a little bit, and over time, we become convinced that that altered version is what happened. So having the child do this at a time where it's relatively recent and then videotaped, I think that is probably a really critical piece because things, as you say, might change.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, sometimes adults have a way of telling the child what really happened from their perspective, and that's not always what really happened. And so being able to have the child come in when it's fairly fresh, ask the stories that aren't, ask the information that's not pointedly specific to what happened. There are ways to get to the issues without just coming out and, how tall was he? What color was his hair? Those kinds of questions that are, you need to get those while they're fresh and for the greatest potential to prosecute.
Now, I'm sure there's a myriad, Craig, of challenges in doing this kind of work. From your perspective as a board member, I bet I can guess the number one challenge, but what kind of challenges are there in doing this sort of work?
From a board perspective, we're not involved in, of course, the interviewing and so forth. There's not a lot of details that come to us as board members. We understand the cause, we're behind it, and are the driving force to create awareness. It's not something that anybody wants to talk about. It's not a type of organization where we're wanting the numbers to grow. So it's totally a different concept of sitting on the board, trying to drive this organization. From those aspects, the awareness piece is definitely something that we're looking towards as a board, of really getting this information out to people to create awareness that the service is there and what we do, that although the name is Child Safe and it is in a house, that we don't have the children there. That's a big misnomer that is one of the challenges with trying to create the awareness that we aren't a safe house necessarily. We provide a very safe service, but we don't have the children there.
And I would imagine as part of this, one of the things on the board that you find as a challenge, I'm guessing it's every board's challenge, is money. The services that you provide and the facility that you have, I'm sure there are challenges in terms of trying to do the kind of things that you need to do financially. What are those challenges that face Child Safe right now?
I think the growing challenge is the fundraising component. We service 11 counties. We currently are situated in Sedalia, the heart of Pettis County, and we've done a really great job of cultivating donor investors within the Sedalia community. But Johnson County and Pettis County Johnson County, Saline County, and Pettis County are our three largest service areas, and we've not done a good job going out and telling the story in those communities, creating awareness, and then finding opportunities to cultivate donor investors in those communities as well. So that's a big challenge before us. We also service 8 other communities, counties that are smaller and more rural in nature, don't have a larger city hub within them, and so we really need to look to our 3 largest pools and do a great job of telling the story and creating that awareness. About half of our budget comes from state appropriations. The Child Advocacy Centers in Missouri, there are 5 of them in Missouri. They are all appointed different counties to service, and then that money is divvied up through the state to those different agencies. So about half of our budget comes from that. Half of our budget comes from grants. I mean, a quarter of our budget comes from grants and a quarter of our budget comes from fundraising efforts. And so we know that in order to move the organization forward, be able to offer our staff competitive salary and benefits, we're going to have to increase the percentage of dollars that we bring in through the fundraising vehicle. So that's one of our biggest challenges facing us right now.
And I would say another aspect with finances of another important piece that we're looking towards, despite not just the staff, is looking for the location and the building. And when this was created by this group of, great community leaders and practitioners about 15 years ago, the location was actually a donated home. So it was never intended to have lasted this long. It's an older home, so definitely a goal financially is to then provide, a much more usable location that's going to extend Child Safe on many years into the future.
And like everything else, I mean, it just becomes that's a goal that you have, but then there's keeping the place up and keeping it lit and keeping it warm and keeping it cool and all of those things. So like so many other organizations, you folks are out there, trying to tell the story and raise money for a very good cause. But the truth is, in our society today, there's just a lot of folks out there asking for that kind of support. So it's difficult from that perspective, but I think also difficult, differently for you guys in that people probably don't want to really talk about
It's true.
what you're doing.
It's true. It's not a subject that you really want to sit around and chat about. It's a hard subject. I couldn't do the job that our team does at Child Safe. I couldn't. That's why I serve on the board. Because I can make a difference without having to deal with the issues because they're very trying, and I can't imagine the challenge of working with a child day in and day out and hearing the sickening stories that some of them tell. And so I think it's important to do what you can, how you can, and we have a lot of opportunity before us, and I think reaching out to Johnson County and Saline counties in particular will really help us to elevate our efforts.
When you think about, Craig, the challenge of trying to find a place going forward, when you think about the challenge of just your day-to-day operating costs, what's the plan? What's the outlook here in terms of what you're hoping to accomplish in the next few years?
Well, we're really at an exciting time right now. It's kind of bittersweet. Our executive director is retiring. It's been the only executive director that we've had. So we've gotten to a great place with this first 15 years in this executive director. So we have a new horizon with this new chapter of an executive director coming on board with some of the points that Mary Lee was sharing of really concentrating on expanding versus just a real concentration in Sedalia, Missouri, of bringing that to Warrensburg and Marshall, those areas of the Saline, Johnson County, Pettis County, and really reaching out into the community to, create awareness and outreach to drive, more finances and those dollars that are hard for all of us to get, and to create more of awareness. Just being bold as a board and saying, even if it's not something that everybody wants to talk about, we have to make it aware. We have to outreach and engage other community people that will have the same passion that we do to know that this is a service that is needed, even if we don't want to talk about it.
And I definitely feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, you guys can correct me on this, that folks would assume, well, that's a police, that's not, you don't need this thing. You have the police, why don't you just go to the police?
Well, and that just goes back to the issue of helping the child realize that they've not done anything wrong, helping them feel comfortable telling their story. You walk into a sheriff's office and you see people walking around in uniforms and guns, and it's sterile and it's not warm and fuzzy. And that's not a place for a child. As I said earlier, our systems are set up based on adults, and unfortunately our victims are under the age of 18 and they need something different.
And with going and interviewing or interviewing the students, is there a reason why you couldn't go to them? So help folks understand why you want to have a facility as opposed to just going to their house or going to visit the children. And
I think that you need to pull the child away from the situation. More times than not, the child is victimized by someone that they know, oftentimes a family member or someone that's close to the family. And I think that if you keep them in the environment where the incident occurred, they may be less likely, they may be inhibited to tell what really happened. And bringing them in someplace where it's new and it's comforting and they can just be themselves and tell their stories without the pressures of the environment there, I think, are important aspects.
And Craig, you mentioned earlier that you've been on the board for about 6 years now. Have you ever had an opportunity, and maybe that doesn't work this way, but have you ever had an opportunity after a child has been helped to sort of hear the story or see, or has anybody sent letters to you? Or
It's interesting that you asked that. Generally, we don't get much information like that. We
Right.
can't share that. I mean, that's part of the awareness is we can't do a lot of advertising or sharing the story or really creating that engagement with people. However, during a fundraising effort, going to a local retailer in Sedalia for one of our fundraisers asking for a donation, by chance I was just going in to pick up this donation, and there was a woman that I approached to pick this up, and she just started sharing the story that her child had actually been victimized, and Child Safe was an absolute wonderful help. It had been years in the past, and it was a positive experience despite what had happened to her child, and she just openly, unsolicitedly just shared this whole story with me. So that's something that does stand out in my mind, that they are few and far between,
Right.
but you do get that, and there is positive reinforcement. There are thank you letters, but it's not something that's able to be shared, or there's not a lot of it. And sometimes it's years down the road that we then, have the conviction of somebody that is usually considered a reward, that, that's a job well done, that we can actually champion for that child and have a conviction.
So the process takes a really long time. Folks don't want to talk about it. The children involved have to be protected, and their identities have to be protected, and their information has to be protected. And your job is to go out and convince people to support this.
It's true.
That's a pretty tough task. I mean, really, you can't say much. You can't divulge much information. And where many other charities could show videos of somebody that they've helped and that sort of thing, very difficult for you to do that. So how do you do what you do?
Well, thanks to programs like this, we're able to share our story and get the word out there. We do a lot of friend raising. We try to cultivate in as many volunteers to an event as we can, and they become our advocates. They help tell our story in the communities that we provide fundraising events in. We have several fundraising events throughout the year, and without the volunteers that come in and do it, we couldn't do it. We also have a strong process for onboarding new board members and sharing with them the story so that they are also armed to be strong advocates for the organization. And in the Sedalia community especially, the radio stations have been tremendous friends of Child Safe and have invited us in numerous times to come on air and talk about our programs and services generally related to a fundraising event, but there's always that component of what our mission and vision for the organization is. And they've been great champions of Child Safe and helping us get the word out. The newspapers have been sponsors of different fundraising events, and to that end also then do feature stories on the organization. And so it's just, the word of mouth is a great resource, but also being able to utilize the media in different ways to share our story from the perspective of how you can make a difference versus through the eyes of the child that has been victimized.
Well, certainly, we've had Big Brothers and Sisters was on the program, and that's a whole different thing, right? I mean, it's much easier for folks to wrap their brains around that and to get volunteers for that and all those sorts of things, because that's a fun activity. Sure. Whereas what you guys are doing is, I really commend you, because there's really no ostensible reward from your perspective. You don't get the warm and fuzzies from talking to the kids that are involved. Literally, you're doing this work and you're really kind of isolated from the actual process.
It's true. Our staff has done a phenomenal job of when a child comes in and has been through our services, they have blank canvases available, and the child is able to put their hand in paint and put their handprint on a canvas. And then we collect those throughout the year, and then we use those as sponsor thank yous to organizations that have made a difference, and to just show that the impact that they've had on helping that one child or 10 children's handprints on the canvas. And so our staff has done a phenomenal job in helping us tell the story as well. They are a commendable group of interviewers and experts in the field, and we couldn't do what we do without them.
I would like to add that hand painting print. It's very impactful. I have it hanging in my office, was granted one after being on the board for some time, and I have it in my office, and it's a talking piece and creates awareness with clients that are in, and then pointing out that that's not my son's painting, and it says Child Safe on there, explaining that all those handprints are true live handprints of individuals that have went through Child Safe. So it creates a pause for you to reflect and realize what a difference it does make, because especially if you then see how many of those canvases we have throughout the year of giving.
If folks are watching this now and they're thinking about, I would like to help, how do they get involved? What can they do? How do they help Child Safe?
Great ways to help. We are in need of donations always, as we've talked about. We're in need of volunteers. We're in need of gas cards. Many of the families that come in that are victims of possible rape, we have to send them to Children's Mercy in Kansas City for a screening. And so we provide gas cards often to those families to help them offset their expenses of having to take the child up there. So gift cards, food gift certificates, things that can help family members during this time, their time of need. Our website, www.childsafehouse.org, has a full list of our wish list, as well as how to make a donation online. And we have different fundraisers that are coming up. We've got one in July for a color dash. A great way to come out and enjoy I think it's a 3K walk, run, stroll, whatever you want to do.
That's good, because I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said walk.
Yeah. Or you can volunteer to throw color and not have to walk at all, which is what I do.
That's probably more my speed.
So there are different ways to volunteer your time. And then, of course, we're always looking for people that can serve on the board and can give of their time and their expertise and help us move the organization forward.
Craig, from your perspective as somebody who's been on the board for a while now, and I know people don't get on this board for this reason, but what do you get out of it? Why are you doing this?
Like many, and what I always say is, once a friend of Child Safe, always a friend. It is a lot of time. There isn't a lot of, fun things to talk about, but it's something to be very passionate about once you are involved. And then the other individuals that are there, it's something to be truly passionate about. You are making a difference. And it is a big difference, because we don't really know exactly what we're doing. We get some snippets, and it's this really kind of out there concept that the reward happens to be there. And it's simple as that. It's children, and I couldn't do what the staff does, as Mary Lee talked about earlier.
Right,
it's just something that takes a very special person to do that, and to know that I can support somebody to ultimately support the children. It's rewarding.
Mary Lee, how about you? What do you get from being?
Absolutely. I found my passion in helping kids probably about 12 years ago. And I was raising a young daughter, and every day I would tell her, stand up for yourself. This is what you should do. And I found myself in a career where I was doing the opposite. And so found the opportunity to go into nonprofit management. And I've never looked back. Being able to support a mission where at the end of the day you make a difference in the life of even one child, is reward enough just to know that because of you, somebody's had a better day. And for me, that's thanks enough. So.
Can we mention the website again? So folks watching right now, if you would like to get more information, what is that again?
www.childsafehouse.org.
Childsafehouse.org. And there is a wish list on there?
There is a wish list. There's a donate now button. There's a link on there about volunteering. There's information about our upcoming events and fundraisers. So everything is there. So we would appreciate people going out and learning more about ChildSafe and figuring out how they can be a part of an exciting movement to make a difference in the lives of Central Missouri.
Craig and Mary Lee, thank you so much for joining us today. And again, that is ChildSafe, and you can go to their website. If you forget and you watch this and you're thinking, I meant to go to that, just visit us at kmos.org. We'll have all that information up, and this program will be online as well. Thank you so much for joining us here for Pause today. I'm Dr. Phil Hoffman. We'll see you soon.